We live in a society that worships youth. On television, in magazines, in advertisements and on billboards, what sells and what is sold to us is youth. But in some cultures, it is the elders of the community who are valued and whose wisdom is sought. In this series, we are going to seek out 6 prominent elders of our tribe, each over the age of 65, to see what life has taught them. Welcome to The Elders. She has walked with monarchs and dined with the leaders of her age. Though her family name is considered one of the most powerful in the world, she has lived a life of service. And beneath it all lies a love story that not even death has been able to diminish. A love story that began 80 years ago for the remarkable Dame Elizabeth Murdoch. Was it love at first sight?
Yes, definitely.
That remarkable night where you first met,
Yes, that's right.
Still clear to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you describe to me that meeting?
Well, we were out at a dance and we were introduced, but he didn't even... I was with another escort, so I didn't dance with him, but I was struck by his strong, strong eyes, and I kept sort of looking, seeing. And next day, he rang, asked me if I would go out with him to Portsea. And I said yes, and I got into terrible trouble. My family said nobody should go out with a man so much older than herself and so forth. Anyway, next time he asked me to go, I had to tell him, and he said, well, if I can get a chaperone. So he got a chaperone. And it wasn't long before we were allowed to be engaged. But it took a bit of doing, and it caused quite a stir, you know, to be thinking Keith was 42, I think, and I was 19. And we were allowed to get married. So I'm so grateful that we had nearly 25 years of such happiness in which we had those 4 lovely children. And no, I think I was born lucky.
It's interesting, though, the definition of luck. I mean, you would say it was lucky that you met Keith.
Keith, yes.
But it wasn't entirely lucky, was it? He wanted to meet you.
That's right, yes, I suppose. But I was the one who was lucky.
Well, that is true. I'm interested, though. He saw your picture in the social pages.
Yes.
And he said, I would like to meet her.
Yes, extraordinary.
It's a beautiful story. Did he ever tell you? He must have told you what he saw in that picture that made him want to meet you.
No, I don't know why. I think it just took his fancy, you know. I don't know particularly why. It wasn't a particularly attractive picture or a particularly attractive young woman. Certainly not. It was an awful picture, I thought. But anyway.
Elizabeth had claimed the heart of Melbourne's most eligible bachelor, a man of some reputation. By the time of their marriage in 1928, Keith Murdoch was managing editor of the Melbourne Herald-Sun and a familiar figure in the corridors of power, both in Canberra and in London. At 42, he had already made the Murdoch name one to be reckoned with. What makes a great marriage, a good marriage?
Well, to begin with, you've got to work hard at it. You've got to not only have great love, but you've got to respect. And I think respect is enormously important. And I certainly had a lot of respect for my Keith. I learnt a lot from him. I learnt tolerance, for one thing, and tolerance is very important. I always remember going across the Atlantic with Winston Churchill on board, and he was up all night practically, playing cards and drinking and so forth. And I said to Keith, why is this man considered great when he has these awful faults? He said, I've met a lot of great people, and the greatest of them very often have the greatest faults. And I think that's true.
In your life with Keith and since, you have held dinners for and broken bread with many powerful and famous people, yes. Prime ministers. Mm-hmm. What is the art to holding a conversation over a dinner table, to engaging someone?
Ask the man what he does. That's I never stuck for a question. If you ask your next door neighbour what he does, it flows out. You can't stop him.
What if it turns out they're very boring?
Oh, you lead them on to something else.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your parents, the kind of people they were. You were the apple of your father's eye, is
yes,
that right?
Yes.
You two were very, very close.
Yes. The others thought, he spoilt me, so they took it out of me to make up for the spoiling.
I believe that Rupert, your father, on occasion let you puff on his pipe, is that right?
Yes, and also chew tobacco.
How old were you when you were chewing tobacco?
Oh, very young, and I was very sick afterwards.
Did it put you off it for life?
Yes, indeed.
I believe he was doing a wise thing. Your dad, Rupert, was a big man, wasn't he? A big character of a man.
A very big character, yes, yeah. Yes.
When you look back on him now, what sort of man would you describe him as?
Well, he was a good father, but he was not at all domesticated. He was not an easy man. He was a short-tempered man, and in a sense, he was rather egotistical and quite intolerant of any of our shortcomings. But he was in the wool trade, and all the people he helped to train, they were tremendously fond of him. And I think that he was seen at his best outside his home. He was very, in some sense, very unkind to my mother, because he was very intolerant and critical. And he married my mother. And although they had difficulties, they were very fond of each other. Although he was difficult and had shortcomings, he was a bit of a gambler, and that was frowned upon.
He was a lot of a gambler, wasn't he?
Yes.
Because it really did affect your life, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Terrible.
In what way?
Well, because my mother was always short of money and always anxious, and in those days, we were always running into debt. Gambling is a frightful addiction. It's almost worse than, I think, drink and drugs, but gambling is an obsession.
I read that there was an occasion once when you were just a little girl where your dad bought you a tricycle.
Oh. And we couldn't afford it. And my mother sent it back to the mutual store. And it really broke my heart. In fact, it made me really dislike my mother for a short time, because, we had very few things, very few toys, and this came. It was a terrible blow when it went back, but I recovered.
What kind of a woman was your mum?
She was a wonderful woman. My mother was a wonderful woman. She, with her strength, really, that's brought us through. And she was so thoughtful and generous and kind to other people less fortunate than herself. Although she had a good deal to put up with, she was always very kind to anybody who came to the door or anybody in need. And I think she was a very good example to me about caring for others.
And if any of you, if you or your sisters exhibited selfishness at all, were you reprimanded?
Oh, yes. Very so. But I think something I very believe in, loving discipline. And I think that's what we got from our parents.
And how would you define loving discipline?
Well, the affection's there, but the discipline has to go alongside it. I think some parents make a great mistake. They love their children, but they don't exercise enough discipline.
With your own children, how did you draw the line? What was the line for you?
Well, they would say I exercised a lot of loving discipline. I was never indulgent with them because my husband was inclined to be a bit indulgent, so I had to swing the other way. I think they'd all, but they all grew up to appreciate my attitude about material things, you know. That's the difficult, I think it's a very materialistic age, and children have far too many things.
What is the benefit of a life with less as opposed to more material things?
I think you're more appreciative. I think you only appreciate the highs when you've known the lows, don't you think?
In 1952, half a lifetime away, Elizabeth Murdoch's world stopped. The death of Sir Keith made headlines around the world. At 43, this mother of 4 children had no choice but to start life over. Yet for her, it had been clear from an early age what she was supposed to do.
I was taken to the Children's Hospital from school as a reward for having knitted a record number of singlets, dirty little grey singlets. I was taken at the age of about 16, and it made an enormous impression on me because I saw babies coming out of a theatre screaming and terrible. I was so upset with what I saw that when I couldn't go back to boarding school for a couple of days. And it was then, I think, that I made up my mind I was going to do my very best for the Children's Hospital. Didn't dream that it would be such a very important task, but I certainly set my sights on serving there.
Is philanthropy about more than simply giving money?
You must be involved. I think if you've got money, it's perfectly easy to give it away and nothing to be particularly proud of, but it's being involved and knowing what you're helping and you know, really being committed to whatever things you're helping. And I find I'm involved in so very many things. It's just amazing. But it's very rewarding when you feel that you are making a difference to the lives of other people.
You mentioned before about materialism and how you think that this is a material world. Your own family is a family associated with wealth. What are the advantages of wealth and what are the dangers of it?
Well, I think the advantages of wealth is that you have an opportunity to do so much good. Wealth can be very misused, but generally speaking, it's a tremendous tool in helping the community. People say to me sometimes, you must be very proud of Rupert. And I know what they mean. They think he's made a lot of money. And I say, I am very proud of him because he's a good father and a good son. And that's what I'm proud of. I'm not so proud of his wealth.
Well, that's interesting because he has amassed an extraordinary fortune by any standards. As you say, you lead by example. Is this a conversation you have with him about how that wealth can be used to the public good?
Yes, I talk quite a lot with him. He does do a lot of good. Does a lot of good nobody knows anything about. He's very generous. Well, I shouldn't say he can afford to be, but people who can afford to be are not always generous. That's the sad thing.
No matter how old you are and how old your son is, he's still your son,
yes,
isn't
yes,
he?
Yes, yes.
How do you address an adult child if you feel they're going the wrong way?
Well, Rupert and I don't always agree, but we respect each other's attitude. I express my views very strongly, and Rupert listens to them, sometimes takes my advice, but on the whole, you just have to, I think, maintain your views without insisting that somebody else accepts them.
I read a couple of years ago that you were involved in something like 100 charities at that time.
That would be rather conservative of anything.
Conservative. I was fascinated with the range of them because some of the people you'd chosen to help are people that society considers to be very much on the fringes. Prisoners, people with mental health problems.
Yes, it's so important.
Why did you choose to help those people amongst others who a lot of society turns away from?
Oh, because I realised how important they were and how much they needed help. Mental health covers a lot.
Prisoners, for a lot of people, are ex-prisoners, are people that don't deserve redemption. Why do you want to give your time and heart to them?
Because I think you can help them to rehabilitate. I don't know whether you've ever heard of a thing called Somebody's Daughter, run by Maud Clark. It's wonderful, what the tremendous record there of helping people back onto their own feet and giving them new life. Oh, there's plenty of room for that. I find that the people who run them are so good. They're so selfless and so good at giving their voluntary time. The world is full of good people.
Isn't that interesting? Because there are plenty of people that would say that people are no damn good.
I know, but that's wrong.
How do you persuade people to do good, to give?
I used to be very anxious to help people anonymously. And then I decided that sometimes it should be known, because by example, it encourages other people to, and I think that's probably been quite useful in many ways.
In 1963, in recognition of her work for Melbourne's Royal Children's Hospital, Elizabeth was made a Dame by the Queen. When at 97 she became Victorian of the Year, The Age dubbed Elizabeth as the woman who shaped Melbourne. Much has happened in the 56 years since Keith died, but the flame of her marriage still burns bright. You chose not to remarry. Have you been lonely in that time?
No.
Really?
My marriage, my happiness has strengthened me and carried me on. I never lonely. Besides, I've got such a lovely, caring family.
When you were raising the four kids, what values did you insist that they had? What were the rules of the family?
They had to do what they were told, mainly. But no, I brought them up to think, never to think of themselves, think of themselves, to be thinking of other people. And they have grown up to be very caring for other people. And I'm glad to say they've passed it on to their children
Well, you do have 72 of them, I think.
63.
60, some extraordinary numbers.
Yes.
Do you remember every birthday?
No, I take no notice of birthdays at all. I think they all have too much anyway. And I put a lot of thought and care into their Christmas presents. And that's a lot of Christmas presents to find. I've given them lovely books. You know, there's always something like that I can give them which they appreciate.
We're also in a world vastly different to the one you grew up in, where there's television and the internet and constant distractions.
Yes.
And how do you feel about the sort of values that are instilled in children today?
I think some of the values are quite wrong. I think that the worship of money, for one thing, is quite wrong. Money doesn't bring happiness. It's your attitude of mind that helps you to enjoy life.
Was there a time in your life where you were truly afraid?
Afraid. I think I was very afraid of what was going to happen to my daughter Helen when she was dying. That was the worst possible time. But on the other hand, it was a wonderful time. She knew she had 3 months to live, and she was determined not to have any treatment because it was so difficult for everybody else. And we saw such a lot of her. One stage I rang up and said, "There seems to be a queue of people visiting you, darling. I'll have to get in the queue." He said, "Oh, Mum, I'm having a most wonderful time." People came from all over Australia to be with her. She was a wonderful person. But it was then, I think, when I heard that I was afraid that she was going to die, that was the worst moment, I think, in my life.
And how do you deal with that kind of fear?
Oh, pull yourself together and get on with it. You can't be worried about how you feel. You know, being afraid is not something to be ashamed of. It's just something that's there, and one is afraid of something, of what might happen more than anything else, isn't it?
As a parent, I cannot think of a harder thing than to bury your own child.
It's the worst thing possible, because you think you're the one who should have gone, not... No, I hope it never happens to you.
Have you found a way to farewell her? Or, in a sense, is she still here?
Yes, she's with me. I've got a picture that large on my mantelpiece up in my bedroom. She speaks to me every day. It's the most wonderful picture. She insisted on getting herself to a charity ball in Hamilton about 3 weeks before she died. And it's the most beautiful picture. And I say, she speaks to me every day. And she's an inspiration to me when I'm thinking, oh, I don't think I'm going to... I must. Helen would expect of me.
To a young woman today that's starting out the world, that's 19, the age you met Keith, what advice would you give to a woman about how to approach the world?
I think always with optimism and faith in the power of good and tolerance, and always to be thinking of other people before herself.
You said the word faith. Does God have a place in your universe?
Not a personal God. I believe that somehow there is a higher spirit, but I don't quite know how to define. But I don't believe that, you know, when we die we go to heaven or anything like that. I thought you might ask me this question, and I wondered how I'd answer it. I don't think I've answered it very well, but that's the best I can do.
There's no easy answer to that question. No. For some people it's absolute. Yes, there's a God. And
it's so easy. I wish I had that blind faith. That would be a great comfort. But unfortunately, I haven't. I think, I reason a bit too much.
Do you have a sense of what happens after you die?
No, I don't think we... I think we leave something, but nothing happens to us personally.
Would you like there to be an afterlife?
No, it'd be very uncomfortable, I think.
That's very good.
But there might be all sorts of people one didn't want to see again.
That is true, although you would see Keith again, maybe.
That's right, yes.
You're going to be 100 in February. Are you excited?
No. I realise my time must be running out, but I'm not going to waste a minute of it. And I hope to live till I'm 105 at least.
And why 105?
Well, because that's a fair run. I might even be able to live a bit longer, I hope so. In fact, I'd like to live forever.
When you look in the mirror, what do you see?
I hardly ever look at myself as so displeasing.
Really?
Well, I forget I'm looking old, but I do. And so I don't look too often. I'm not conscious of my age at all. It's extraordinary. Your mind and your outlook is exactly the same and never changes.
Does your body start to betray you, though? Is that a frustration?
No, I think one just have to accept it. It's inevitable. And, no, I think, it's no good questioning the situation you're in. You're in it and you've just got to get on with it.
Are there assumptions that people make about you because they think you're old?
Yes, I think they think I'm unable to do this or that, and they marvel when I appear. I'm out and about a lot. And they seem to be quite surprised that I seem to manage all this. But I'm so lucky to have kept my enjoyment of life, you see. Although I am so old, really very old, I think that therefore people's assumptions are quite wrong. They don't realise that I still have the capacity to enjoy life.
100 years, as you said, that's an age.
It's a long time.
That's impressive. There are English cricketers never get near that number. As you've got closer to death, has your attitude to it changed at all?
No, I don't think so. It happens to us all. It's no good. Nothing to be done about it. It's inevitable.
I think it's important to have some good last words in mind. Something clever to say. It is recorded that on his deathbed, Voltaire, who was not a believer in God,
no.
The priest visited him and asked him to renounce the devil. And his last words were apparently, "Sirs, this is no time to be making new enemies."
That's lovely.
You clearly love to laugh. I can see that you're a big laugher.
Yes, I'm a great laugher. Rather loud, rather a vulgar laugher.
No, it is not vulgar. If laughter isn't the expression of the soul, then what
yes.
is?
Where's my bag? Because I've got something written. I wrote it down. I thought it was...
This is something you wrote down about God?
Yes.
Is that your dreaded red?
That's my dreaded, yes.
And this is where everything's kept?
That's the sort of day.
Wow.
See?
Yes.
That's May.
That's busy. How many nights a week would you go out?
About 4.
4 nights a week?
Mm.
And do you have a day of rest? Do you take Sunday off?
No.
No?
Can't.
What do you mean you can't? How do you relax? How do you...
No person or God need be worshipped, for us to live in amazement at the beauty and immensity of creation. It's good, isn't it?
That's beautiful. Do you know who wrote that?
No, it was in a book called Loss of Faith.
That's interesting. Why were you reading that?
Well, an old friend of mine who's my same age and thinks a lot about life, and he's an agnostic, and he's always reading things to prove. Thank you.
To prove the point. So,
no personal God need be worshipped for us to live in amazement at the beauty and immensity of creation. I think that's good.
That's marvellous. I was reading a quote from someone who just turned 100. She was an anthropologist, and she described it beautifully. She said, "It's like I'm standing on a peak by myself, that everything else has receded, all my contemporaries have gone.
Oh.
But even though I'm alone on this peak, it gives me a chance to look at life in a special way."
That's a lovely way. Great.
Do you have that sense?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
It feels to me that one of the harder things about living to your age is the fact that...
all your contemporaries are gone.
Yes.
Practically, nearly all mine are gone. Everywhere I go, I'm the oldest by a good bit, you know. However, you can't change it.
Does it feel lonely sometimes?
No, I'm never lonely.
But sad?
Sometimes.
For 80 years, Elizabeth Murdoch has lived in this house, tended to this garden, watched it grow and nurtured it, just as she has with so many lives around her. Does this house feel like it's a person to you because you've been here so long?
Yes, it does, really. Yes, definitely.
So are there parts of the house where you walk where there's Keith and where there's Helen?
Yes, he's here all the time.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what's the remarkable thing, I think. One's very fortunate to be able to feel that they're still with you.
And that's a strong sense.
Very wonderful.
Actually, if Keith were to return now, because you've had a whole other life since he died, what do you think he would say about what you've done with your life?
Oh, I think he'd be very proud. I don't quite know why, but I think he would be. Because I haven't wasted a minute. I've made use of all time, I think, and good use of it. I hope that's what one would think.